It's here okay. Can you hear me now? Brilliant, okay. Well, thank you very, very much for inviting me here today. I was really delighted and absolutely honoured, actually, to get your invitation. And I first met some of you amazing activists against puppy farming at the Ceredigion Council Licensing Committee meeting hearing earlier this year that was looking into the prosecution of the Lampeter puppy farmer Richard Jones, who, as you all know, had been found guilty of 21 charges, eventually found guilty of 21 charges of causing unnecessary suffering to the dogs for which he was responsible. And I went along to that licensing committee hearing because I've had dogs as pets all my adult life, and I live in Lampeter, so he's a sort of distant neighbour of mine. And I had for years heard about the large-scale puppy farming in West Wales, and I was curious to find out more about it. And this case in particular, which I found shocking for many reasons. Firstly, that over the years there were concerns about Richard Jones's puppy farm that had been flagged up to the council, but it had passed vet inspections, and Jones continued to receive breeding licences. And secondly, that when his licence was removed, he was told to improve the standards of care so that he could get re-licensed. And in the meantime, he was allowed to hold on to those dogs. So in the eyes of the law and the powers of the council, it was okay to have these large numbers of dogs being kept in unsatisfactory conditions. But it was not okay to breed from them. And finally, when Jones was eventually prosecuted, and 113 dogs, as you know, were found suffering in his care, the animals were mentally stressed, they'd had no exercise or social contact even with each other, conditions were absolutely appalling, they were dangerously thin, one of them was suffering from gangrene and septicemia and was close to death. And yet, between this point and his later conviction, despite animal welfare organisations offering to rehome the dogs, Richard Jones was allowed to dispose of the dogs himself, with no record of where these poor, suffering animals went to. Did he sell them on to another breeder to continue their miserable lives, or did he himself kill them? And we will never know what happened to those dogs. But what we do know is that at no point was the welfare of those dogs given precedence over Richard Jones's right to own and earn money from them. His economic welfare was given precedence rather than the health and the well-being of the dogs in his care. And it's a serious business, isn't it, this treatment of our pets as economic units. And from what I understand, there are around 30 licensed breeding establishments in Ceredigion and at least 80 in neighbouring Carmarthenshire. And in these two West Wales local authorities, from what I can make out, there are more dog breeding establishments than in all the other local authority areas in Wales combined. And then there's the sheer number of dogs being kept on these puppy farms in West Wales. And we have, I'm ashamed to say, puppy farmers being granted licences for and breeding from massive numbers of dogs. 95 in one establishment in Ceredigion, 81 in another, 113 in another, and in Carmarthenshire the scale is even larger. One puppy farm is keeping 120 breeding bitches, another is keeping 147, and another is keeping 156. And these are just the breeding bitches. These do not include puppies or stud dogs. And so this is dog breeding on an immense scale. It is industrialised. And in granting licences for these numbers of dogs, Carmarthenshire and Ceredigion Council are legally sanctioning the battery breeding of dogs. And Richard Jones and all those other puppy farmers are being provided with the opportunity and the right to profit from the misery of animals within a system that supports this expediency and the opportunity to neglect. And this then becomes active cruelty on a wholly industrial scale. And not only is this morally reprehensible, it's also massively expensive in terms of suffering, vet bills, heartache, and health problems that continue to manifest in generations of dogs further down the line. And there are, of course, right and just arguments to say that we must improve the conditions and the quality of the conditions that these dogs are kept in, that the standards for breeding our meat and our crops deliver a better provision for welfare than the breeding of dogs, and that even our chicken is no longer battery farmed, and that is because of the pressures on and within the industry, that industry, to improve standards. Now, I'm not so sure that the standards of welfare for those industries is as high as it really could be, but yes, it is better than the standards of puppy farming, unenforceable as those standards presently are by the local authorities with neither the funds nor the ability and nor the political will to systematically address the fundamental issues. And it's right as well to put pressure on the industry and to keep challenging the legislation, to challenge the Kennel Club as well as the local authorities, and to work to ensure that the issuing of licensing is independent and accountable, that the conditions of licensing are adhered to, that the socialisation, enhancement and enrichment programmes are followed through, and that the paper exercises of staff to dog ratios are enforced, and that inspections are unannounced. And there are also arguments, and they're strong and they're good arguments, to say that we must continue to publicly campaign to educate the public against the buying of puppy farm dogs, and indeed all the charities working to prevent this cruelty are doing everything they can to educate people. But unless funds are made available for the kind of public information campaign that only the government or big business can provide, I don't know if education can keep pace with the production of the dogs. And certainly the sale of puppies by third parties, whether by individuals or by pet shops, must be outlawed. And as a Labour Party member and the Labour candidate for Ceredigion in the general election, I am really pleased that the outlawing of the sale of dogs by third parties is in the UK Labour manifesto.
Yes, hurrah. Yes, well done.
And I am delighted, I'm really delighted to be standing here today to support all of you and the organisations you represent, working so hard to get this enshrined in law, because it will help to stop the puppy farmers hiding behind pet shops and the dealers of dogs, and it will help to make them traceable and therefore prosecutable for cruelty and neglect, and it will help to prevent the suffering of all those dogs in puppy farms in West Wales, and it will also help with the developing international and European trade, illegal trade in puppies. But, bottom line, when we get right down to it, my belief is that what we really need to do is arrest the huge scale of puppy production and put a seriously restricted ceiling on the number of dogs that any breeder here in the UK can be licensed for.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we need to stop considering animals in terms of economic units of monetary value, and we need to look really carefully at how we can start healing the corruption of the relationships that we have with all the animals on our planet. And I'd just like to finish with a little bit longer with something Alice Walker said, first of all. The wonderful Alice Walker said that the animals of the world exist for their own reasons. They were not made for humans any more than black people were made for white or women were created for men. And I believe that a good place for us to begin that healing is with the domestic animals that we share our everyday lives with. And just as we're now saying that we need to start thinking again of our houses as being our homes and not an asset, so we need to return to thinking of our dogs as not as economic units, but as our original far side companions. Dogs of any shape, any size, of some or any or indeterminate breeds, healthy, happy, socialised, who derive as much benefit from us as we do from them, and who we treat with the compassion and the respect that they deserve. And finally, I'd like to finish by saying it's when we allow our dogs their integrity as a species that we allow ourselves the dignity of becoming decent human beings. Thank you very, very much.